Hello everybody, it's Karen and I'm glad you've stopped by today. I am doing another video about these darned white scraps. Now, this is my box today. A few people had asked about it last time. This was how it was when I first started my last video about the white scraps. So it was jam-packed full. And I'm happy to say it's getting better. I still have a long ways to go, but I just plan on doing these techniques a few times this year. Now, if you didn't see my first video about how to make those white scraps turn into these colored scraps, I'll leave the link to it below. But I thought that I would do a video today about how to use these colored pieces because it's almost like if I don't put these into cards, it's just another box of scraps. So I've got a very small square die. I think it was about 1 inch in square. And I've got a piece of acetate here that is 4 1/4 inches wide by 11 inches long that I have scored in half at 5 1/2 inches. Now I've got masking tape covering the top 1/2 inch there, and you'll see why in a little bit. But for now I am just centering that on my mat. I'm lining it up along the grid lines, trying to keep it nice and straight. And I've die cut all those squares from the colored scraps and white ones from the white scraps. And because it is a small die, it's kind of nice because it will fit. You can get quite a few scraps cut with it. And I just tried to get a range of colors from darker to light. I didn't do a rainbow effect, but it was more just dark to light. I'm lining up this first square now using my grid lines and just trying to make sure it's centered on my card. And then I'm just going from the center one out, just getting the points lined up and lining it with the grid lines. When I got to the top here, I flipped it over and just used my pencil to mark where the masking tape was. And then I just used my trimmer or my scissors, I don't remember which now, but just cut them in half like that and then glued those in place. And then once you've got it all filled in, you take it off, and of course you're going to cut the back excess off. And then I used some of that to just fill in the bottom corners where I was missing a couple of pieces. So if I can say it, this ended up being my most favorite card of all the ones I'm going to show you today. I really had fun doing this one. So on the inside I glued the white strips or the white squares down, and I have cut 2 pieces of cardstock here now that are just a little bit narrower and shorter than the colored section. So just under 4 1/4 by 5 inches, I think it was. I've put this one inside my card. Now it's inside the acetate, and I'm just lining it up. I've got the glue on the back, and I'm lining it up with the colored squares underneath, and I just hold it down, and then you can close the back acetate down on top of it, and that will pick up the white card where it needs to be. And it's glue, so you have a minute to wiggle it around if you didn't get it quite right. And then the second piece I'm gluing up, and I'm putting on the other side of the acetate. So the acetate is now sandwiched between those 2 squares of white card, and it's so pretty. It stands up really well. Now, I did another one. I had an older die, I don't know what it was, but it had those wavy lines to it, and I just used a Lawn Fawn hillside die to cut the top one. It had a kind of similar shape to it. So this piece of acetate is 5 inches wide by 11 long, and again I scored it at the 5 1/2 inch mark. It's a nice heavyweight acetate, and I will link to it down below. Now for this card I'm using this Pink Ink Designs, the Podfather. It's almost like false advertising on the front because you flip it over and the stamp set is beautiful. There's all these 3 whales on there. They're just really pretty. So I've used that one whale and the fish for this card. And you can see I'm taping my acetate to that white sheet just so you could see it a little bit better. And I've penciled in a straight horizontal line and a straight vertical line. And I'm going to start gluing this piece down. I'm just going to put it below that horizontal line there. So that's basically that 1/2 inch that I had saved on the other card. And as you can see, I'm going to put the fish up there. He's in the way, but he's going to go up there. So I'm just lining this up. Now I cut this piece of acetate to be 5 inches wide. So it's a little tiny bit wider than my colored up pieces. And I just thought that would be kind of a fun effect. You don't obviously have to do that. I just did it. So I'm just gluing all these pieces down underneath, lining them up left to right. And then I'm going to glue the fish across the top 1/2 inch there. So I thought that was kind of a fun effect to have that acetate up at the top with something else different on it. Now, here's where you're going to think, wow, she's a weird chick, because I looked at that and I thought, oh, that kind of looks like fish. So yeah, I've put googly eyes on it. I don't know, I saw fish. After I did the fish at the top, I just saw fish down below, and so I went with it. Now, for the inside of this one, I have cut a piece of cardstock that is 4 3/4 inches by 9 1/4. And I've used that Tailored Expressions, I think it's called On the Spot embossing folder. And that will fit inside. So this will have a flap on the inside of it now. So a little different from the card before. But I'm going to put it in exactly the same way. So I have got it glued up on the back, and I'm going to open my card, and I will put the embossed side down over top of I can see the colored card underneath, so I'll just center it over that. And once I have it there, then just let the acetate come down and pick it up where it needs to be. And then again, I put another piece of white card over the back of that just to hide all that glue. And so that's how it looks, googly eyes and all. Now I did this one as well. I kept the top as a straight rectangle, and I did cover these ones on the inside with white scraps. So there was that one. Now here's this one again. I didn't glue up on the back of that, so you can see the glue, or I didn't put white scraps over it. But I felt like with that flap, you were more focused on lifting the flap. And so on the inside, there's that whale and a bit of the seaweed bubble stuff and the sentiment from the Pink Ink Designs stamp set. That's my masculine card, by the way. Okay, now here's the one that I really like. Just happened to have those flowers and leaves in my stash and the sentiment. And so that one is all covered up on the inside, and I just added the little butterflies at the top of that one. Now this was an example of using a cover plate die, and I just pieced in small sections of the colored cardstock that I had. And then to assemble this, it was so easy because this particular die is from Paper Rose Studio, and it does die cut a frame. So the frame I just tucked inside my acetate card, and I taped it down. But then all I had to do was I put glue directly on the acetate and pieced in the sections of, colored paper that I wanted to use. So that was really quite simple. But if you have a die that doesn't cut the frame, you could stick the die directly into the acetate and then just paper piece back in using the die as your guide. So super easy to do that. And I used those same little etched butterflies that are from Paper Rose as I had on the other card there. Now this was another example. I'm not really thrilled with this card, but that was using a cover plate die as well. And so was this one, and I don't like that one as much either. So now here, this one, it's another acetate card, but I was using scrap background, and I just thought for all of these, if you have got pattern paper, colored cardstock that you're trying to use up, just think of those, and they will all work well on the acetate. So whatever you have in your stash, I would say dig it out and cut it up, because these pieces were horrible backgrounds before they were cut. Okay, so on to the next. I've got this pink fresh border die. I just chose the fairly simple one. It's a bit of a scalloped edge. I've die cut that from white scraps, and I had these other greeny blue scraps as well. Some of them were a bit wider than others. So the green one you need one that's a bit bigger, like that green one. But like this one is really small, so I was really happy to be using it up. And I just glued the colored portion to the white one, and then I started layering all of these up together, just lining them up and gluing them down. And then for the top one, for that green layer, I've added some more white scrap to that because it was bulkier at the left end there, and I needed to build up underneath the green part a little bit. So here you can see I've glued it all down to my card base, and then I decided to cut the card base as well with that same die. So that's the finished card. I've just added those Cosmos flowers from Simon Says Stamp, and the hugs I think is Waffle flower hugs. But they were in my stash, but I thought that was a fun way to use up those scraps. Now for this card, I've got an A2 card base there that I have covered with double-sided adhesive tape, and I've still got lots of these white strips. So I just glued 2, 3, 4 of them together, whatever sizes I could find that would fit. I glued them together so they're all different heights, and then I'm just alternating, and you guys have seen this before. I'm just alternating a white with a colored strip of cardstock, and then I started trimming this off as I got it built up a bit, and that is how it ended up looking. And it's actually quite fun because there is a lot of texture there. The colored layers are all just one layer of cardstock, but the white ones are raised. But I still had these little strips, and so I am just putting a bead of glue along the middle of the white sections and adding a strip to the white parts. Just trying to use up more white cardstock. So now there's even more texture and dimension to this one, which really was quite fun. And this is how it ended up turning out. Now, that celebrates. Whenever I'm finished with my distress ink, or in this case it was metallic gilding polish, before I clean off my sponge, I just get all the excess off on scrap pieces of white cardstock. And then I've got those in the future for either a shadow sentiment die cut, or the sentiment itself, or flowers, leaves, whatever. So keep that in mind. Okay, so for this card, I've got a scrap piece of white cardstock that I think measured 3 inches by 5.5 inches. And as you can see, I've embossed it with Spellbinder's embossing folder. And I am just trimming off both edges, I think it was a half, maybe 3/4 of an inch wide. And then I've still got some of these strips of colored cardstock, so I am just going to alternate layers of the greeny colored cardstock and the embossed sections. Now you could also add more scrap cardstock underneath these layers to add a bit more dimension, but it's quite fun with the texture from the embossing folder. And there it is, all finished. I had most of those images in my stash, so that was kind of lucky that they all matched up so well. Okay, for this card I've got a slightly bigger piece of colored up card, and I'm using an A2 card base here, which I've scored in half down the front side. And I used that same pink fresh dye and cut the edge of the card base itself and that scrap. I also had these circle scraps in my stash, which I've embossed one of them, and this one I used more of the Distress Mica Spray stain on. Now I got to this point and I was thinking, well, that I didn't know if I liked the square at the top, so I have used the same pink fresh dye, and I just cut an extra white scrap to go in behind that. And now to glue this down, you only want to put glue on that bottom half of the card front. You don't want to go past that fold line, or it will not stand up as an easel card. So all I'm doing is gluing it down to that bottom half there. And you can see how that will become an easel card. Now for this embossed circle, I just took my Versamark ink pad and I'm lightly rubbing it over the raised portions. And I've got this mica powder. This was from Cosmic Shimmer, but any mica powder would work, Perfect Pearls or anything else you have. And I started with the purple, I went to pink and ended up with some gold, and I'm just lightly rubbing that over the Versamark ink. And it's a very subtle effect, but you can see that slight tint of color and a shine. And so I am attaching that now to the front of the card, and for the stopper, I have this Make-A-Wish sentiment, and I've die cut that 2 or 3 times from white card and once from the colored card. And then all I did was add that little happy everything sentiment and a few pearls onto the front, and it's quite a simple card. So I hope I've given you guys some inspiration on how to use up some of those scraps, both white and colored. I do think the scraps look better on a card than they do sitting in my box, so I'm quite happy with that I'm starting to get through this stash. So everybody have a great day. I hope I'll catch you next time.